Welcome to Bitcoin Fixes This, where we explore the impact that Bitcoin will have in all aspects of society. Today's guest is Yeonmi Park, North Korean defector, human rights activist, and author of the book In Order to Live. We talk about authoritarianism, the current state of the world, and how it looks to someone from the outside. Yeonmi also tells us about how money works in North Korea, how she's become more libertarian, and how she views Bitcoin's role in the world. This was an eye-opening interview for me about the authoritarianism that we face. While most people talk about how different North Korea is, I was more surprised at how similar North Korea is to the US, especially in terms of its growing authoritarianism. This is where Bitcoin is a shining beacon of hope to take our freedoms back. I hope you enjoy this interview. Yeonmi Park, how's everything going?
It's going wonderful. Despite everything, it's going great.
Where are you right now in the world?
I live in downtown Chicago.
I see. And what's that like these days with COVID and everything?
This was a very interesting year because, it wasn't only COVID. There was a lot of summer unrest of racial injustice movement. So there has been lots of protests, but also above that, a lot of rulings where I live in downtown Chicago. It was a very interesting year for me to learn and grow and understand new things.
I can imagine. How long have you been in Chicago, actually?
I was visiting here a lot, but I permanently moved here this year, like right after Christmas. So like in January after New York.
Oh, wow. So you've been in Chicago mostly during COVID where you can't really go out or anything.
Exactly. Yep. I've been just here all this time. And before this, I lived in Manhattan. So it was both are very interesting cities for sure.
Well, what's it like for you? Because obviously you grew up in North Korea, were in China for a while. You were in South Korea for a while. I think you were in Seoul. And now you're in like these other cities in the US. Like, what's that like for you? How do you see these cities?
It is a different planet coming from North Korea. Being in the US is like really, one of the extreme you can get. Well, the furthest, like the opposite you can get, right? So it is also, it's almost like sometimes unreal to me. Even like my mom was here until yesterday. She went back to South Korea. We were talking about, not even in wildest dream in ours, we were thinking we are going to end up in America. We always call the bastards country. So yeah, it's been so, so unreal and also amazing.
Okay. One of the things that I get from all your interviews and your books and everything is just how grateful you seem to be for the situation that, especially today, like in this era of COVID, even like when you're speaking about this, it's just kind of like you seem to have a gratitude about it that a lot of people don't really appreciate right now.
I guess maybe, yeah, I do hear that a lot. Like, you're just so positive. Like, why are you so happy? And and like, I was like, I don't need drug to be happy, But I guess because I have seen the darkness, and it does make me aware of more lights around me. And that doesn't really mean that I don't have any bad days. I definitely do have bad days. Like my mother, she, so appreciates even the light bulb, the lights coming, and she loves the sound of like refrigerator. So we had them, and she's like, look at that, like there's a refrigerator, like robot, always knows when to turn it on and turn it off. But she every night when she goes to sleep, in her dreams are still in North Korea, oppressed, trying to escape and scared and tortured. She cannot go to sleep without any medication that helps her to calm and like that. So she cannot really do daily activities during the day. Despite that, she's the most joyful person I know. And, we are just grateful, even though in our dreams we are still in North Korea. At least while we are awake, we are in freedom. So, nothing to complain about it there. Yeah.
Wow. So I read your book. The book ends sort of with South Korea. And I guess if you were to make a second edition, there would have to be another whole section on the US. Can you tell us a little bit about what brought you to the US and, what you plan to do, I guess?
Yeah, so what brought me to the US was writing my memoir, as you said. I wrote the book in New York and in Montana. So that was great. And then I went to school in New York at Columbia University. So that really made me to move here. But also the reason why I stayed or so tried to live my new life here was, really honestly, I was treated as a second citizen in South Korea. And despite everyone says like America is very not inclusive, I felt most included here in America where I don't even speak the language that well.
So I think you speak fine, but yeah.
Yeah, it was like such an ironic situation. I went to South Korea in the hope of finding my people and my just like one Korea. There was no North and South Korea to me. But when I landed there, they were more branding me as some like, some spy coming from the communist country or some like a backwards country coming there. That wasn't that trustworthy. And coming to America was very refreshing because here people really didn't care that I was North Korean or what kind of history or what kind of things that I went through. They really cared like who I am today. So, it didn't make me ashamed of my past being here.
Yeah, that's interesting because at least my immigration experience, I immigrated from South Korea when I was 8. It was interesting because, at least at first it was very difficult because I didn't speak English or whatever. But about a year in, I spoke enough English, then I was able to get along with people. I think the reverse would have been much more difficult, in part because of, how Korea is. It's just very homogenous. There aren't that many people moving in per se, although I hear it's changing now. Whereas America is like this country full of immigrants. So they're used to lots of people that are coming in that, like they haven't seen before or aren't familiar with. And it's just sort of like, we'll judge you on your merits instead of we're going to have all these preconceived notions about you.
Yeah, I think that's the really beauty of, I think that's when I realized, this is what they meant by American dream. Because in South Korea, even though I spoke Korean really fluently, because I was saying few words differently than South Koreans, they had like North Korean, some vocabulary left in me. It was like they were just laughing at me, making fun of me. But here, I don't even know most of like basic things, and people like, as long as I know how to communicate basic things, they're okay with it. Yeah, it's like it's just culturally very different. This is an immigrant country, and Korea is not used to it yet.
Do you think that's going to change in South Korea? Because I do feel like, so I visited South Korea, after I left, like in '94, and and that was weird because like Kim Il Sung like died while I was there, which was kind of odd. But then I didn't go back until a couple of years ago, like 2018.
Really?
So yeah, and like during those 20 something years, it had changed so much. And one of the things I noticed was that there were tons of foreigners in Seoul, which I never saw when I was there. So, is that going to change, do you think?
I think they have to be, right. South Korea is such a like global economy. It's very westernized. And I do think like South Koreans are very open to the Westerners. Like, I don't know generalize, but like they are more okay with the people who's like more white, English speaking Westerners. But they are not really okay with the people like Vietnamese, Laos, or Thai, or North Koreans, like coming from the third world country. But I think, they have to change because they cannot really stop this movement of us becoming mixed race altogether. And I think, they will change, but it will take some time. And I think America is way more advanced when it comes to embracing diversity. But, I think Korea will get there, of course, eventually.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of have to, right? Like the birth rates in Korea are insanely low. They're having to bring in tons of people from Vietnam and so on.
Yeah, they have to. Yeah, exactly what you said. They have no option in this.
Yeah. Other things that I was really curious about, like reading your book, like here's a quote that I want to read back to you from your book, page 69. And it's talking about how your parents needed to sell their house, but it was a tricky thing to buy and sell property in North Korea because everything belonged to the state. So that brought up just so many questions for me because, in a communist state, you don't have personal property or private property at all.
Yeah.
But somehow you have money and somehow you have these things that you use. Like, how does money even work in North Korea? What's that all about?
It's like almost like the basics or joke. Now I'm thinking about it, like how were you even like operating in that way? So there's no such a thing called the contracts in North Korea. I never even like knew the word what contract was. There's no lawyers. There are no account. I mean, there are. I heard some like very lawyers, few people in Pyongyang, but like average people don't even know the word lawyer. We never need the defense. Governments like do whatever they want to with us, right? We don't ever get defended by anyone. And no accountants. So basically, when we trade houses, it's all verbal. And now I'm thinking about it, how the heck we trust it that much? So everything's verbally traded. So house and properties like homes or lands or the cars is not, people cannot own them. So when we say like we sell the house in North Korea, that means we sell the right to live in that house until the government comes to ask you to leave. So that's like the old, in the context of North Korea, that's what we are saying, buying the house or selling the house. And when we sell the house, it's not like we have people around us witness it, just verbally like 2 of us or 3 of us in the family members sitting down. Do you agree like this amount? I'm gonna now let you move in here. And that's how we buy a house. No paper, nothing, just like words. Yeah.
Wow, that's so crazy. So basically, you have the right to live in the house, and then the government might take it at any time and make you leave.
Absolutely, yeah, they can. I mean, so whenever government's like, "Oh, your leader gave us this house to live in," but that doesn't mean it's yours. They're gonna ask you to leave after once you retire from that job, and then you just be homeless. So that's like that's our common sense there.
Wow. So you literally get a house as part of your job and you get to use it until you leave that job? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, a lot of people in Pyongyang, the scientist who works in this like building nukes or like all these like sectors, the government give them the house, and then once they are like done with the job, they have to go. And if they are like lucky or have those some corrupting friends, they can find a way to find different secure house. But usually, yeah, then you need to leave the home once you retire.
Okay. Wow. So there really is no private property whatsoever.
No.
So how does money work? Do you have a bank account or do you keep it in cash? Or are they bills? Like, what's that like?
Yeah, that's such a funny story. So I knew though there's a place called the bank in my town, and it was all empty. Nothing was there. So I was just playing with my friends in front of the yard of the bank. And I asked my parents like why they have built this place called the bank. And she couldn't tell me back then because she would get in trouble. But she told me now because so they didn't make a bank when my mom's generation, like which is 40, 50 years ago, and then asked people to deposit money in the bank. People did deposit the money, and then government refused to give them back the money. So in order to get your money back, you had to like bribe the person in the bank who has a position to give you some money on the side. So after that, people do not trust the bank, so did not put the money in the bank. So banks became useless. So that's the thing when I never knew what an ATM machine was or understanding the concept of credit card was the hardest thing. Like you put your credit, government give you some kind of paper thing or card. I mean, it was so complicated. That's why when North Koreans arrive in South Korea, it's not like they're difficulty with learning new language. You can learn language like from South Korean to English very easily, but you don't have the understanding of the concepts. That is the hardest thing for North Koreans to understand these concepts of, banking even.
Yeah, and credit and interest and, just very complicated things.
Yeah.
So let me get this straight. So they opened the bank and they had people deposit money and then they couldn't withdraw the money at all.
Exactly. Yep. Some people did because they bribed someone in the bank on the side and they didn't even get the full amount, like some amount back. But most of them couldn't get it back. So they stopped using banks. So it's just a sad story. There are so many thieves in North Korea. I mean, because life is so difficult, right? And so people really trying to hide money in the, floor. They dig the ground, or sometimes they really, because thieves come look for literally everything inside the pillows, everywhere you can like hide something. And then my mom's friend, she was put the money inside in North Korea, we don't have this like gas or cooking things. We have to make a fire. And then cooking on top of it. So she put the money in there. So thief would not come and look inside after the fire in a place. And then she forgot one day and then made a fire. And
oh no.
Yeah. And she got so depressed. They were suffering so much afterwards. So, there are so many stories like North Korean people just trying to hide their money, and it's a real problem because, money is like a very visible thing. So people can like come easily find it.
So, oh my goodness. So because the banks actually refuse to give you money back, you have to store your money yourself and you end up losing it or, getting it stolen or whatever.
Yeah, it's very hard to. So some people like when make the cement on the wall, they put the money in the plastic bag and cement it all. And some people just come like destroy your wall and seeing if there's money hidden too.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty elaborate way of hiding money.
Yeah.
And who is it that steals? Is it just like people that are desperate, or is it government officials, or who?
It's like a lot of soldiers because, every man in North Korea who's like above 4 feet or something have to go to military. That's like how malnutrition affects people. Like North Koreans are so much shorter than South Koreans, even though we are the same race. And so a lot of soldiers, they go to military and the regime doesn't provide food to them, and they say it's our self-reliance. Even though you are like in the military, you have to be self-reliant and find your own food, which means being a thief. So, although these soldiers of this socialist paradise, they become thieves, and except a few ones really super elite groups in Pyongyang, the countryside, they're all suffering and malnourished. So they become thieves and look for these things.
Oh, wow. So they just go into houses and start searching?
Yeah, they do. And they just steal a lot of things. And, they also have to survive. And that's why a lot of soldiers die in the military because of malnutrition and all those things.
Oh, wow. That is so crazy. So is it North Korean currency that you're hiding, or is it like foreign currency?
So in 2009, Kim Jong-un, I think 2002, 9 or 10, something around then, Kim Jong-un, when he was trying to become the next heir to the party, he did this thing called the currency exchange. So he said, like, basically, you only can exchange 30,000 yuan in North Korean money. Doesn't matter you're a billionaire, it doesn't matter you're a multimillionaire. All you can get is 30,000 yuan. And then try to make everyone equal. So what do you think is going to happen, right? It's like one day your government comes like, all you can be worth is $100 now in new currency. It doesn't matter how much you had in the past. And that's how he wanted to try to equalize everyone and bringing this socialist paradise idea to everyone. And that didn't work anymore because back then, my mom's parents' generation, they were at least providing some kind of food and public rations. But North Korea stopped it when I was born in the 90s. So if you don't give us money and no food and not letting us trade, like how do we survive? You cannot just like survive not eating, not anything, right? So that currency exchange brought so many tears to North Koreans. So they burned their cash. They were so angry. They were throwing the first like resistance happened in North Korea, which is like during that time they were throwing this money because they became trash because the government said like it's not worth anything now. All you can be worth is this new currency is like 30,000 yuan. So they were burning it, they were throwing it to rivers, and they were killing themselves. And then like North Korean regime for the first time realized this was a big mistake. So they executed the person to say, even though it was Kim Jong-un who did it, like someone on the official and said it's your fault.
Oh, wow.
And then afterwards, that in 2009 or 10, North Korean people lost their faith in North Korean currency. So now in North Korea, in Pyongyang or other countryside, they use Chinese yuan and the US dollar.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that people do not trust North Korean yuan anymore.
But that's what you were using before that currency reform.
Yeah, I was using North Korean yuan because I escaped in 2007. But a few years after I left, now like everybody's using foreign currency. And yeah, so that's how these people are trading these days.
Wow. And how do they get their hands on foreign currency? It has to enter the country somehow.
Through China. So there are a lot of smugglers and money brokers in the border side, and they bring Chinese yuan and the US dollars through China that way.
Oh, wow. That's so crazy. So in a sense, you kind of have private property, right? Because you do have at least cash that's yours, I guess.
Yep, I think so, because North Korea, that's why it's not a socialist anymore. It became some crazy dictatorship with the religious court and whatever it is, like the corrupt gangsters, or more like you think of North Korean regime, can think of almost like a mafia, a gangster group. They selling the regime sells drugs. Like literally, North Korean regime makes like ice and meth and cocaine and heroin and selling them to other countries, and they sell missiles and they sell people, their own people. So yeah, it is like very not normal country.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, so speaking of that, like how much Marxism did you learn? Like I understand, like at least from the book, the impression I got was that you learned to worship Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un, or, you know, those are like sort of like deities. But how much do you learn of, say, Stalin or Mao or Karl Marx?
So North Korea does change their opinions a lot on their allies or their enemies. Like, do you remember like reading 1984 by George Orwell? Like one day your enemy was like uninterested, and the other day like you go there, your enemy just switched. Someone has a war with the other one, and like that. They were initially saying Lenin, Marx, and like Mao were the heroes of this humanity, and then they were saying, oh, they were the betrayers of things, and like that. They were saying China was our greatest ally, and then one day they were the mouthpiece for the Western propaganda. And they were switching a lot, but North Korea, what they did is like called like Kim Il-sung-ji or Kim Il-sung people. So they created the word, not Asian, they created a word for Kim Il-sung race.
Oh, wow.
So North Koreans are not Asians, they are Kim Il-sung race. And our calendar doesn't begin with when Jesus was born. Our calendar begins when Kim Il-sung was born, which is like Juche year. So we call Juche 1, Juche 2, like Kim Il-sung was born. That's our history begins.
Oh, wow. So you're in year 100 something?
Yeah, we are like Juche 100 something right now, because that's like when Kim Il-sung was born. And then they rewrite this whole thing from they initially started as communism and then socialism, but then they found this thing called like Juche ideology, like self-reliance. And then they found their own ideology, which is making Kims as gods. And yeah, it's like they created a religious cult afterwards.
And how did that evolve exactly? Like, where did it sort of change along the way?
So I think the power, any absolute power corrupts. So I think it just they got corrupted, and the Kim Il Sung's son Kim Jong Il, when he was trying to be, trying to take over, because Kim Il Sung had a lot of kids from other wives too, and as Kim Jong Un, he's not from the first wife. They all have to compete to be the heir. And Kim Jong Il be trying to nice to his father. He was in this department of propaganda and creating this opera, music, and art to really make a myth about as a like mythical like feature of this his father. So that really began, I heard, like around the 70s and 80s. So when I was born, like I was completely in the final version of like mythical Kim Il Sung time. But my mom's, when she was young, it wasn't still that as bad.
I see. So it was a lot less earlier on, and then they just ramped it up as, I don't know, I guess as they went on or something.
Yeah, I mean, like when people like saw Kim Il Sung, like people saw that he's not a god, so but like now, like my generation, of course, we don't know how he looks like, and if they tell us he's a god, we're gonna believe that he's a god. And like, so they were eliminating a lot of people knew the facts about Kim's, and they were really like editing these photos of Kim Il Sung only looks really great, and he had this like a lot of defects in his feature, but they were all hiding it to us, and saying things about kind of miracles they can make, and people like more people who knew about the truth of dying. Eventually, what you read in like Animal Farm, the last generation of pigs, they don't even know what it was like before then. So like me, like I didn't even know what alternatives were there. I thought that was like only universe that we all were in.
Wow, so crazy. So I guess you didn't learn that much about Karl Marx or socialism and communism. It was much more geared towards Juche ideology, and
it was everything about Kim's. It was all about memorizing how many, what kind of victories they won, how many miracles they can make, and about the poem that Kim Jong-il wrote, like about Kim Il Sung's birthday, his father's birthday, his mother's birthday, what year he had like battles with Japanese, like tons of nonsense. Now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, this is like the most important subject in school. You can fail at math, you can fail at like writing, but you cannot fail at the history of Kim Il Sung and Kim Jong Il and Kim Jong Un.
Oh wow!
Your family in trouble, yeah.
Wow, this is so crazy. So they don't care if you fail at something basic like reading and writing, but if you don't memorize like the birthdays of Kim's relatives, I don't know, what do they do to you if you can't?
I mean, they're gonna bring our parents to school and gonna ask them to write down the self-criticism things, like how they fail to educate their children. And then if it's severe, they're gonna send them to labor camp.
Wow.
And it's gonna be, and then they're gonna criticize you publicly among all your colleagues, how they failed at, revolutionizing their children. And also we are gonna go to the manual labor to think about our faults in the revolution, and then learning more about the revolution history and become the better revolutionary. It's all about revolution in North Korea, literally.
Wow. Yeah. It reminds me of like some like people that lived under communist Russia at one point, and they were telling me that it's all about protecting yourself and making sure that the workers' revolution continues, and then you can get to sort of this workers' paradise or something like that. At least that stuff seems to have lasted.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like the socialist paradise, right? They like, oh, you suffer, but we will get there, and that's a paradise. It's like almost like they copy the Bible, right? You suffer during this on earth, glorifying God and living His wishes and preaching His words. But when you die, you join Him, no suffering with God. That's what they're saying. Like, oh, Kim Il Sung loved us so much. He gave us his son, which is Kim Jong Il, and his body dies, but his spirit never dies like Jesus. So he can read my thoughts. He knows what I think. Like when I was reading Bible, I was like, oh my god, this is like Kim Il Sung and you know.
Yeah, it sounded like, I don't know where I read this, but I read that they actually purposefully took a lot of biblical references and just sort of like changed it up or something. Because like before, Kim Il Sung came into power and all that, North Korea was actually a very devout country, like that area. And like they killed so many people that were Christian and so on. And I don't know. Like I heard, for example, that Kim Il Sung's mom's birthday is very close to Christmas, for example. Is that true?
Yeah, so that is a very correct. Pyongyang especially was really hub for these Christians. They were like thriving with these Christian missionaries. But so Kim Il Sung, the first Kim's mother was very devout Christian. And then Kim Il Sung was very brilliantly copied the Bible and knew how to brainwash people, how to make the logic of it. So actually, his wife Kim Jong Suk, and Kim Jong Il's mother's birthday is on December 24th. So I did not know what Christmas was in North Korea. I mean, we celebrate December 24th because there was like mother of our nation's birthday. I came to the West, people were saying it was Christmas. Like, what is Christmas? And they were like, you don't know Jesus? Like, who is Jesus, right? And in North Korea, I don't know if Kim Jong-suk was born on that day, but they did make a December 24th as a national holiday and celebrating the mother of our nation, which was like Kim Jong-il's mother.
Wow. So so they did take that and sort of incorporate it into this weird cultish ideology, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like when people try to understand North Korea as a normal country, it's not. It's a religious cult. Like what the regime tells us, like how the regime understood, like when you become a god, you don't need a logic to explain things to people. Like here, I cannot see God, but how do I believe you are there? It's like you don't understand as a mere human. It's a God's creation, like God's lover. How dare you asking for seeing God or seeing the miracle in front of your eyes? So they knew that in order to brainwash us making all these absurd claims, they had to be a god. Otherwise, it's impossible. So they became gods and then made us to never challenge the logic.
Oh, wow. So this is sort of taking all of what you just said and like applying it a little bit to what's going on today. So a few of the things that I've seen in your videos, and you kind of mentioned the whole self-criticism session, where you have to criticize yourself and then maybe even point out a colleague or a comrade to criticize and so on. Like, when I see stuff like, critical race theory, where a lot of these companies, you have to go to these sessions where you have to talk about how you're a racist, right? Like it seems very similar to me. Like, do you worry about any of that?
Oh my, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, it's a shame. Culture is so that I didn't expect it to see here. Like somehow you're not woke enough. You're not aware enough. You're not sensitive enough. It's like in a way. So in North Korea, of course, like the first thing my mom taught me was not to even whisper because the birds and mice could hear me. And if I said something wrong, it wasn't only going to kill me, but it was going to take 3 generations of my family with me to the political prison camps. So I mean, we escaped that, and I came to West, and I see people saying having a different views, having different opinions, and then that get them fired from their jobs. It's not as bad as North Korea, but in a way, it's a bit more scarier to me personally, is because, like, even the things that I'm telling you right now. In North Korea, if I were lucky, there was no mice and then birds, I would survive. But in this country, it's all recorded. Everything is on the internet. It doesn't disappear. So it can haunt me 70 years later or even haunt my own child later. And the thing is like you really cannot change your mind here. And that's what, I mean, I went to Columbia University in New York, and it's all about learning about being awakened and sensitive and caring, and it was like I got into fights with my professor because she was telling me that when letting men to hold the door for you is like it's a toxic masculinity, and they are trying to show you they are higher than me and they're more powerful than me. And I was like, I mean, this is like Columbia University. It's like one of the best institutions in the world. Like literally, foreigners have to pay fortune to study there, and this is what I have to take. It's like in the one of the core that everyone must take. I was like, no, I mean, like I even hold the door for other people. It's not because I try to show them that I am overpowering them. It's being kind, being nice. And she was like, Yeonmi, you're just so brainwashed from North Korea. You just don't get it. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so this is like a new mess that I found in the US. Like, oh my, this is like another twisted victiming, shaming people for the things that they didn't even do for like hundreds of years of what their ancestors did, and now they're asking these people to pay for it. And the people who said they're victims are not even slaves themselves. I mean, I was a slave. I was sold for like less than $300 in my lifetime, and my mom was sold for $65 in this 21st century. And I don't ask for China to pay me for that.
Yeah.
And it just, it is such an interesting world that we are living in now.
So what I was thinking was like, this sounds a lot like Marxism, right? Like this is part like straight out of the Marxist playbook where you kind of get people to denounce one another. And that's, I'm sure that carried over to North Korea. But like one of the things I was reading in your book was about, you know, you're seeing some North Korean propaganda come through where they're getting your relatives to denounce you and your mother. And that to me is just exactly like how it works in the US almost, where, you know, after you say something insensitive, like everybody denounces you. They get like, and they go over to every single person and say, okay, do you denounce what this person did? Do you denounce what this person did? It feels very similar to me.
Yeah, it's like, you remember this time, who was the guy who wrote the musical Hamilton?
Yeah. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
I mean, like, he supported the Black Lives Matter, and then he didn't say it early enough. Then he got... I'm like, it just... I think in a way, it's way more crazier to me here. It's like, I don't know where this is going. That's what scares me, that, like... I mean, I don't even want to pretty insensitive. Like, I mean, having a different opinion doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. Doesn't mean that I'm being insensitive. Like, why, when, how did we come to hear that feelings is above logic? And that's like what North Korea was, right? Like brainwashing and like being a god and making us believe. Belief was more than like, important than like the logic. And here is the same thing, and that definitely scares me. Literally scares me that I don't know when it's gonna stop and where is it heading to, and I don't even know what my future holds after all these things that I say publicly. Like, when am I even able to gonna get a job? You know, like any normal corporation, will they even take me? I don't think Google will take me. As you know, they fired this man who had a very normal, different, like logical opinion, and they fired the guy. So I don't even know if I can find a job if I speak my mind freely here.
Well, this is one of the things that I've railed against for forever is that there's almost like a cultural Marxism almost in the corporate world, where if you don't have the correct opinions on something, they kind of get rid of you.
Yeah. But the thing is like that I think public was almost like a lot of public wants that, right? They ask people to fire people if they have said something different than what they want, and even they are keep changing what's the right way to do things. So how can we ever meet their perfect standard? And I mean, the diversity that I was looking for in this country was like diversity of thoughts and opinions. And what they want is like uniformity thoughts.
Which is exactly what you came from.
It's not true yet. Like, they want us to see the same way, exactly the same level. If we do not, they shame us. and they calling our names. And this is like, I don't know how Americans are in the land of free. Why are they letting this happen?
Well, that's a really interesting question to explore because,
Mm.
in a sense, like, how did North Korea get to be how it is, right? Like, how did it get that bad? Like, was it just they had overwhelming military force? Like, was there something more subtle there?
I think it was definitely both. They had this way of zero tolerance.
Mm,
But they did not take any dissent. That's exactly the reason why there is no dissent in North Korea, unlike in Iran and Cuba,
mm,
or even China. They are not even the China degree of that tolerance. They zero tolerance. They literally wipe 3 generations of your family out
mm,
if you show any sign of dissent.
mm,
That definitely made people silent, stay silent. And another thing is like in the beginning wasn't that horrible, like according to my like grandma, but it got that horrible because everyone stayed silent. And I think if they in the beginning everyone stood up for their rights, they could have fought for it. But the thing is like when it came to my generation,
mm,
I didn't even know what French Revolution was. It
mm,
was in my concept that people can fight against the government
mm,
and demand their rights because that was never in our textbook. And people often think like, oh, we know things inherently, but no, like look at the baby, what do they know? They are not gonna know what revolution is.
mm,
So like we are like those Koreans, we need to learn. And because they didn't teach us in North Korea, we didn't even know that was an option to do.
mm.
So yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like, at least in your analysis of what happened in North Korea, it's that it wasn't so bad. They got a lot of stuff for free. I mean, I know for my parents, I was talking to them a while back and they were saying how they went to school in the 50s, right? After the Korean War. And they had school like outside and they wrote in the dirt because they
Yeah.
didn't have paper, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was actually like around the same level or maybe even better in North Korea.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's part of it, is that because it wasn't so bad, that got people to comply more than they otherwise would have.
Yeah, I think, but the thing is, like, I asked my grandma, like, South Korea, North Korea, they do definitely demonize Japan a lot, and they talk about colonization of Japan as something that was the worst thing ever happened to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother, she was as a child worked as a like a housekeeper, like the slave. It's not like house. There's no dignity for them, like a housekeeper in the Japanese household.
Mm.
So she was like worse you can get. She was a slave to Japanese like couple, and she was as a child washing and like sleeping with animals in the barn. And she said even that was better than living in the Kim Il Sung time.
Oh, wow.
So I think what they really was creating this fear,
Mm.
and that's what I see in the U.S. right now. What they're doing is like fear, like, oh, if you dare to stand up and having different opinion than us, I'm going to go destroy you. I'm gonna destroy your character, and like, there's so much like this character assassination happens,
Mm.
and they're taking things out of context and go against you, and they are trying to expose a lot of personal things and make you not getting a job. So all this like the method of like intimidating,
Mm.
that's I think what stopped North Koreans to rise. And also like here's no public execution, but North Korea they did lots of public execution to show people like it was a mandatory even as a minor. Like
Mm.
it doesn't matter you have 5 years or 10 years, just you have to go see public execution like everybody else, and they put you in the first row because you are shorter than the adults.
Oh, wow.
Put the kids, the youngest, in the most front of the public execution, and then let you see like this is what happens if you think differently, if you have different opinions.
Mm. And we're kind of seeing that, although it's not like physical death, you see a lot of these people that get sort of humiliated in this way often like come to symbolize, I guess, like what would happen to you if you speak up at your job and,
Mhm.
I don't know, like object to racial sensitivity training or something like that.
Yeah, I just Jesus Christ, like I never knew this is like what I was going to do in the US. Looking for the land of free, like where everyone having entitled to their different opinions and all of that. And suddenly I was so scared, like at Columbia, like before class, literally the university's like professor was saying things. Oh, we are going to talk about the white, like the books that white people wrote, like Jane Eyre, and and this is all like colonial mindset in there. You should not read the book, and then if this upsets you, you don't even need to come to class. You don't even need to read the class material. And then they literally send you email beforehand. Oh, in the book that we read, it is part someone's talking about their race experience. If this triggers you, don't come to class. I understand.
Mm.
And like people letting them to bring their comfort animals, dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a baby, but they do not allow baby to come to the class.
Mm.
They allow the dogs to come to, and just like definitely, I mean, because I was in the university, I felt so much more every day how everybody was in a way that delusional to me and so, like frightening. And just I have to see the population in general. And is that the same? The companies like that, or is this only universities doing this?
I mean, I think universities are definitely the worst, but the companies are not that far behind, I don't think.
Oh man, oh man, we gotta all go to Mars then.
Or I mean, the thing that, at least having been in the U.S., I mean, like it wasn't nearly that bad when I was in college. That was like 94 to 98, but like back then, I still remember arguing with my sociology professor. She was claiming that all of these people were oppressed and that if you're like, male, that, you're kind of horrible or something. This was back in the 90s, and I thought that was ridiculous. And I told her so, and she gave me a C minus. It's kind of like it's been in that system for a long time. And this is where I think this whole cultural Marxism thing is just so kind of scary to me, because in a sense, I think this is how societies become kind of totalitarian, like North Korea. That's where you kind of end up when you go down this road.
Mm-hmm. I mean, look at Venezuela, how quickly they fell. I mean, it only takes one generation to fall into that dictatorship. It takes forever to build a healthy, functioning democracy. It takes just one generation. And not even that, like look at Venezuela, how quickly they go on that road. So the fact that American people think like, because they all their life what they have experienced is freedom, so they don't ever think this can happen to them. And it's like that until you get a cancer, you never think that's gonna happen to you. Right? Like until, because like my father had a cancer, and I never in my life thought a family of mine was going to die from a cancer. And like that, like until you get into car accident, you never think that's gonna be happening to you. And it's like that. Some people really think it's such a thing. I say to them like, freedom is fragile, freedom is not free. It's like, oh, that's such a cliche thing to say. And no, it's like it's a universal truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That whole thing about freedom is that unless you really step up to defend it, it's constantly just sort of being sucked out from under you, because there's a lot of people that can benefit by taking away your rights.
Yeah, exactly. Just, I'm so like scared now, because it's only this is a month while I was doing my YouTube channel. Until then, I was really trying to be sensitive and trying to really being politically correct. And I was thinking like, this is not why I cross the desert by foot for being like this, not living my truth. And I fought when there was no chance of me winning, but still in America, I still have more chance than when I was back in North Korea and China. So this is like almost like coming out for me. I'm so afraid. Like I did not think people like you existed. But as I say this, they're going to call me Nazi, racist, all of that. So it actually made me more compassionate to people who couldn't come out as gay in the past. Like, oh, this is how they felt. It's like,
try being a gay conservative. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there is sort of like a dominant cultural sort of oppression. Well, not quite oppression, sort of narrative out there that's very difficult to go up against, isn't there? And does that remind you of North Korea at all?
Oh my. So the other last month in the Michigan Avenue, I was attacked by three Black women. It was like a violent robbery in the middle of Michigan Avenue in Chicago. It's like Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. It's like so many people walking by, and these three girls pushed me to the corner and then took my wallet. And then I have a nanny who is like a Muslim wearing hijab. Myself is like Asian. I'm also color person. Whatever they say this in the pyramid of this victimhood, I am all of that. And then because I am Asian, I was asking these three Black girls, like, I'm not accusing you anything. Can you stop until I call the police? And she just punched me on my chest with her fist. And then she was saying, oh, you're a racist, you're a bad person. And then everybody on the street in the Michigan Avenue, only 20 people, were circling me, trying to put me in a corner so I cannot call the police on these girls, and then asking these girls to run.
Wow.
And then like these people were seeing me being punched. I'm like so much smaller than these three girls, and my nanny is right next to me with the hijab, wearing hijab, and my son, 2 years old, like toddling in a stroller, like horrified seeing what it is. And I called the police, and then these girls used my credit card to go to Bloomingdale and bought something, $3,000-4,000 amount, something, whatever they bought. So they got a fridge, and I took the video of these girls while I was being punched. And then police arrest the girl, and then she's being tried, I think, this week. I mean, I'm not even upset at these girls who robbed me, but the people like literally like asking me like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? You're crazy. You're a racist. You're a bad person. Like, color their skin doesn't make them thief. And like, I'm not a racist. That's why I don't see the color. I treat them like humans. Why does it matter they're Black or white or Asian? And I was like, this is madness. These people are delusional. They're like all gone mad. Like they literally saw in their eyes I was getting punched and these girls were running, and they still defend them and not me. This is like not a common sense, right? In the movies, you see somebody get robbed, you say thief and thief. People trying to help you, not calling you racist because you are the wrong color of the skin. And like this was like definitely a time I realized, oh, I cannot go into this route pretending this is okay anymore, because like I cannot let my son to live in this world because he's half Asian and half American. I mean half white. What if the worst combination can be? Literally, I was like, oh my gosh. Like in North Korea, we have the different sangbun status, the family background status. And James got the worst of the worst, my son.
Well, I guess that this is sort of like the caste system in America a little bit that they're trying to implement. That's interesting that you draw that parallel, because it really is sort of like levels of victimhood that you were talking about earlier. It almost is kind of like a class in itself, isn't it?
It's a class. Yeah, it absolutely. If you're like trans, Black, whatever, all these sorts of stuff with you in it, then like you are the highest of the pyramid, and then go to rape victims, different color, and the last is like white men. They are the world. They cause every problem in this world. They are the problem, the source of problem, everything, according to my professors at Columbia. White man is the source of every single problem that this world has right now. And I'm like, things are not that like black and white. That's like how simple the world was, you know?
Yeah, and it's very easy to explain it that way and not get into sort of the nuance or the complicated history of everything. And instead, it's just sort of like a slogan. It reminds me of Animal Farm, right? Like 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, and then just go with that. You know, that's what that sounds like to me.
Yeah, this simplicity and making us not being the critical thinkers. And then saying like, oh, you're oppressed, you're the victim, and you have to have outrageous. And then like in North Korea, that's what they taught us, not to think critically. So the fact that when I went to escape to South Korea, someone literally had to teach me that Kim Jong-il was fat. It's so obvious in the photos that he was a fattest guy, but I didn't think that way because all my life I sang songs like "Dear Leader, Please Eat." He wasn't eating enough for his people. He was working tirelessly. He doesn't sleep at night, and all life I was singing those songs and brainwashed. I never thought in my mind that he was fat. And this is what is becoming in America. They are like literally in universities. It's not like teaching you how to think, but they're teaching you how to think the way they think.
Yeah, they're indoctrinating.
Yeah, it's definitely the propaganda, is another brainwashing, and people are not able to think differently.
And, obviously that's led to significant deterioration in like education and so on. I don't know how much worse it's gotten over the last 20 years, but it sounds like
Yeah, nope. I was saying like there's no way I'm gonna pay for the tuition if my son chooses to study liberal arts in Ivy League school. It's like no way, not even one single penny I'm gonna pay for you. You're gonna do it?
Well, what do you hope to what sort of education are you hoping for your son?
I'm so horrified about like sending my child into any public school. And even private schools, I'm saying like this one narrative. It's like white people are the worst of the worst and they have to feel guilty about being white and being a certain race. It's like, with the shame, you can never reach your fullest potential as a human. That's what we meant to do. There's no forgiveness in this current narrative. Of course, white people did it wrong, and a lot of people did it wrong. Like nobody's perfect, but there's no forgiveness in it. And I want him to. We're still searching, and maybe we're gonna just send him to more like just science technical school, and all those humanity things we are gonna teach him or with a tutor, and just maybe only like learning math and science, the technical things. But not, so we really have to look for right school. And it's so scary one day my son becomes these people and then telling me how, I'm not sensitive enough. Cannot imagine the day like he's gonna think that socialism is the best thing that can have ever happened to America. And it's like America enabled him to be born. Like in North Korea, they don't accept the international marriage. So it never exists in North Korea. Only freedom in this country he was be able to born. And then if he says this is wrong, I don't know where to go afterwards. And because my son never suffered like me, he never seen the true horror of socialism and authoritarianism. He will not get it. Hopefully he gets it, but not. So we are really trying to get him right education for sure.
Yeah, and I think this is why your book is just so important, because you get to kind of get an idea of just how horrible things can get if you go down this authoritarian route.
Yeah. But the thing is like almost like, I think my book is one of the examples of it, but it can get way, way worse than what I experienced in North Korea, because now look at China with this social credit system. They got this facial recognition. They got this app tracks what you order, what you eat, what you text. In North Korea, they didn't have electricity to do that. They didn't have to do that. And this new level of oppression is something I don't think anyone has ever seen in humanity history. So what China is going towards is like almost giving us good insight that what is coming to America.
Well, so here's a question for you. And this is something that I've mulled over and I want to get your take on it. I always thought that the sanctions against North Korea were kind of backwards. Like in a sense, you're hurting the people that haven't really done anything to you. You're trying to hurt the leaders, but they're going to get whatever they want anyway. They can send spies over or like ambassadors over and get sushi or take trips to Disneyland or whatever the heck they do. But the trade sanctions essentially made it so that all of the people that were under this oppression, they were the ones that ultimately suffered. So my take has always been, like these sanctions are doing the opposite of what everybody wants. If there was more trade, then these people would have, more to eat, for example, and be more exposed to Western stuff and be even cause reform, albeit slowly, just within the country. I think the argument maybe that the other side would make is based on what you just said about China and how they're using a lot of technology to oppress its people. So what's your take? Like, would ending sanctions be good for North Korea or head them towards more freedom, or would it be the opposite?
Yeah, I'm absolutely so glad you asked the question. And also, to say that is like, I almost like the first thing is like, oh, the fake news, because like, this is what I'm dealing with. So we have to look at the facts, right? Lifting sanction is what Kim Jong-un wanted to going into the Hanoi with Trump. Why Trump walked away is because Kim Jong-un saying, one thing I want out of this summit is lifting sanctions. And Trump was like, I want you to remove the nukes first. It's like why Kim Jong-un is so desperate coming to all the way to Hanoi and then meeting Trump and begging for lifting sanctions. If this doesn't hurt the regime, why would he come? Do you think literally Kim Jong-un went there to fight for his people? Absolutely not. So the very first thing we need to think is like if Kim Jong-un wants this to lift it, then we know that he's being benefited by this and he's very urgent about this. So that is the one sign that sanction is good for Kim Jong-un. Second evidence is, look at me, why did I escape? When in the Sunshine Policy by Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun, in the early 2000 and that time when I was actually in North Korea, South Korea sent hundreds of millions of cash, and they said like, I sent a cow, have you received it? Literally one of like South Korean asked me like, he sent a cow for me to be fed in North Korea. They sent the medical supplies and rice, everything. And that is the time that most of the North Koreans suffered the most. So when you send these things to the North Korean side, this doesn't come to us. That's why I escaped. If that thing came to me, by the way, still the United Nations, their food program sending things to North Korea. If that came to us, no one would have escaped from North Korea. But they didn't, because in our time, remember, like they were asking to gathering these kids who are so malnourished in a room, and then asking these people from the UN to look at them. And then they see this how malnourished we are, and they go back and they send things like all the formula, everything, and it doesn't come to us. And so those things don't reach people. It only goes to Kim Jong-un's pocket. But how Kim Jong-un uses that? It is true it goes to North Korean people, but the people who want the regime to maintain the control. So North Korea, we say that one of the things they do is a gift to politics. It's a socialism. So Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un use that things that he receives for free, giving it to the most elite people as gifts and show them, oh, this is why you need to be loyal to me, the people in Pyongyang. And the reason why North Korean people are suffering right now is not because we don't have money or we don't have food. This is like what people forget. It's not Haiti. It's not like earthquake hits us. It's not Africa. There's like internal war or gangs or there's like droughts or the environment is causing it. The North Korean regime spends like 80% of GDP on building missiles. If they spend just 10% of their like GDP in that, no one would have to die in North Korea from starvation. They're making us starved on purpose. Creating this man-made famine is because you read the Hunger Games, right? Have you read that?
I haven't, but I'm familiar with the concept.
So it talks about like 13 different districts. There's a capital and 13 different districts, and giving them ration is a weapon for the regime. And then they also making everyone hungry, because if you were fed and then your next word is not about surviving for the evening or next meal or tomorrow, you're going to start thinking about meaning of life. You're going to think about higher purpose. And then it puts into a different mode of thinking. So they make us on purpose starved. So all we can think is, how am I gonna find food for the next meal? That's like every night my parents just getting up at 2 a.m., get scared they would not be able to find food for us to eat, and their children gonna die from starvation to tomorrow morning. So Northern people do not have any energy to think about being free or having human rights or none of that, or traveling abroad, none of that. Like all they're thinking is surviving mode. And that puts us in regime to distract the people from the fighting for more food, and they can use all their money to making missiles and then using those food to, as a gift to the elites. So elites knows that once they escape to South Korea or America, they become like everyone, be equal. But in North Korea, there's a status. So if they like escape, they are going to lose their status, royal status. So these people get incentivized maintaining this status as much as Kim Jong-un does. So that food, that sanction that if we lift them, it is only going to enrich these people who wants maintaining this current situation. And that is never gonna go into the people. So that's the thing, like all these people think going to North Korea as a tourist, right? It's the same argument. Like if I go there, show them how open-minded, loving Western people are, they're gonna change. No, those people you meet as guys, everything is like set up. It's like Truman Show. It's like you are going into the movie set of Kim Jong-un. Everything's set up, everybody's set up, and the people who become the guide to you or become the waitress, everybody is there benefiting of this system. So it's like, you're just visiting like White House to America, and then you say, oh, that's like, I'm going to try to change White House. And like, it's not that way. So it's really sad, like how people, especially on the left, and especially the sympathizers of the socialism and Kim Jong-un, there are tons of people who worship Kim Jong-un, even in America, in Spain, Brazil, everywhere, in South Korea, especially nowadays. And people who are on the left really fighting against with sanction, because it sounds so bad, right? Sanction word. So they're really trying to lift this for Kim Jong-un, and this fake news is so out of control, and they don't talk to actual real North Koreans who escaped from the regime, then who never ever received any of these things. And like you talk to any defector, they are gonna say they never received anything from the international community help.
Yeah, I still remember seeing like a picture, I think it was in like Time magazine or something, sometime in high school, where there was a lot of like food aid being given over, and they showed a picture of like that same food being sold on the black market somewhere.
Yeah. So the officers sell them in the black market, and it's very expensive for us, and then they make their money that way. So it only enriches the people in the power. They become more powerful, and they get more resources to control and then oppressing people. And using all that money, they are building tons of camps in North Korea right now. There was been never more camps in North Korea than now. All that money is going into like building more camps and nukes.
Yeah, it sounds like, I guess you're making the argument, I guess, that like China's got a lot more money as a result of sort of modernizing and so on, but they're also using that money to build a lot of camps for the Uyghurs and so on. So yeah, I can definitely see that, because for me, like, I'm very libertarian, so I'm all for free trade and, doing things on a voluntary basis. But that might be a level of surveillance. Like you were talking earlier about how in America, everything's recorded. Well, if North Korea had the technology, they would totally do exactly that. That they don't.
No, they already have begun that journey. They are, China are sending them tons of the cameras, facial recognition devices to the border areas. So they, in the company, see who's there, who's not, and then putting all these cameras on the border in the river. So in the past, all the guards have to really make sure, look everywhere, and then see someone cross, they shoot them. But now they put so many cameras, so if you see the numbers, the defection coming from North Korea became almost impossible now.
Wow, that's so sad. I mean, how do you see this whole thing ending? Like, do you see, like, I can't see the Kim regime in North Korea ever giving up nuclear weapons. I don't think like they would ever do that, because that's their only leverage that they have against the rest of the world.
Yeah.
I can't see the people rising up either. So how do you think this ends?
China.
Mm,
Western countries have to rise and stay unified, and we have a one voice that to China that stop causing so much suffering to humanity.
mm,
China sponsors dictatorship in North Korea.
mm,
China without Xi Jinping, without CCP, North Korea can never even survive one day. Like
mm,
North Korea have no resources. They don't even have a make 1 gallon of oil by themselves.
mm,
How are they going to test missile without oil? How they drive up their tanks?
mm,
If the China stops oil supply to North Korea, the country just collapse right there.
mm,
They cannot even do the like blowing up the nukes in anywhere.
mm,
China refused to stop sponsoring this dictatorship because they use the Kim Jong-un almost also as a leverage to negotiate with China and making a buffer zone for the freedom of democracy and human rights coming into them on their border.
mm,
So, I mean, people just think like, oh, Kim is the most horrible thing one, but no, actually, China is worse than Kim's because
mm,
they've been sponsoring it for over 70 years.
mm,
So fixing China is so, I mean, North Korea is so easy as if we get China. Like Trump got that right in the beginning. He always said like, yeah, we need to fix China in order to fix North Korea. But
mm.
then like Trump got distracted by the Kim Jong-un's love letters and then now got in love with him. But as I said in the beginning, it was so right that China was the key. We need to raise awareness on the Chinese role on North Korean dictatorship and then shame them and boycott them and then but the thing is like New York Times, CNN, I mean Disney, I mean Hollywood, everybody needs money from China.
NBA too, yeah.
Yeah, NBA is seriously like every major corporation, like I mean every celebrity is on behind of China, and then that's why like it's so scary like how much Americans are not, standing up for what is right, but they are choosing the economic incentive, and this is so scary.
Mm, yeah, they do seem to be going that way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about this stuff. Let's let's just switch up topics just a little bit.
Yeah.
I know you read the book that Alex and I wrote together. What do you think of Bitcoin? Does it have any place in this realm of human rights that you're familiar with?
Definitely, I think I am a classical liberal. So, like you, I am, yeah, like a libertarian. I'm definitely,
Hmm.
I support all the social causes like transgender rights or gay marriage, all of it. I'm so for it, but I want the government to stay out of it as much as they can because
Mm,
I do not trust government. Government's a collection of people who have different interests and usually their own interests.
mm,
And it's not a government, some kind of almighty God can have power to fix everyone's misery and take care of our life, right? So, like that, even the currents that government controls is so scary.
mm,
In like North Korea, what if one day they say like you only can have 30,000 yuan and then like rest of your money is like now papers, it's like trash.
mm,
What stops us? Nothing.
mm,
So bringing this power into people's hands is so empowering and is so revolutionizing in my mind that I can't even put into words that this is such an important step for us to become even freer than before from the government. And I didn't understand Bitcoin until I read your book.
mm.
It was such a hard concept coming from North Korea, it was so hard. And reading that book was like, oh, now it makes sense. And also how this Bitcoin can empower people living, especially under the oppression and the governments that is not on check.
Mm,
Like China, especially, like you can never trust your own government. They can take all your pollutants away right away.
mm.
And that's why I think this is such another way for us to find a solution and combat.
Yeah, it's certainly being used in China,
Yeah.
but it's going up against what you were talking about earlier, the social credit system and
Yeah.
the score and everything else. It really does feel like there's almost like every country seems to want some sort of very surveillable currency that they're going to be able to use. I mean, how much of that do you think can change?
I think it's almost like especially at least in America, we still have that time to fight back. Like, when I was in India, it was so scary. The government really wanted to know everything. So they were trying to become a cashless and also limits how much money you can take out from ATM machine. And even it's your own money, if the government bans you don't even know, you cannot even get it out and spend it. Like almost like it's similar to North Korea, right? If the government's one day, I'm gonna shut down the bank and you cannot, what are you gonna do seriously? And the places you cannot use the cards. And it was like, oh my god, it's crazy how much we give power to this is the most untrustworthy organization called the governments. I mean, to me, it's like they are the worst thing can happen to us. I mean, if we keep them on check and limit it can do good for us. But they are always a danger of become corrupt. And I think that's why in America, why we still have that chance to fight back, people need to, I think, understand more on this Bitcoin and how we can be in charge of this and not rely on the government. And I think that's what is important what you guys are doing now, really educating us and on the dangers of the government. And like, especially after this COVID, I'm so worried about, inflation. So they're printing out so much money. Where is it coming from? Nothing is free. Or like, this is really not a good time. I mean, I am happy, but still, it's a very concerning time. And I don't know how the COVID is gonna end, how it's gonna change our permanent economy ever after this. So it is time for us all to take a pause and rethink how we trust government, how we take charge in our life again.
Yeah, and you're singing to the choir right here, or preaching to the choir right here.
Yeah.
I totally agree, and it's so crazy to me that people are trying to, I don't know, print even more money, and like so much of that money ends up going abroad, and then now then there's like US dollars available abroad. So what do? Well, they devalue their own currency, and then you get hyperinflation and all sorts of other places. It's just such a terrible system that a lot of people just don't realize that, the US can essentially export inflation to other places, and it's a game that can go on a long time.
Yeah, wow. I mean, this is like what I have to learn more. It's like, because I think like you guys said, they make it complicated and common people cannot understand it on purpose, even though it shouldn't be this complicated. and then when we go to university, we don't learn about these things. And this is what we learn is like how to hate white men. It is such a, like, if I were like parents, this is the first thing I want my son to read, like the book that you wrote. It's a pocket book for Bitcoin, right? That's like the first book that I want my son to learn, because money is essential, right? It's not bad. Money itself is never a bad thing. So it's a method for us to live life fully, and we need to understand it, because almost like people live for money. We work for money. Without money, we can never survive. But still such a literal understanding of the money that we work for all day long.
Yeah. So few people understand the money. Yeah, that's really sad. I mean, this has been like such a crazy conversation. I never thought we would get to all of these topics, but it sounds like you're kind of politically more libertarian than maybe classically conservative or liberal or something like that.
No, I am definitely not liberal. That's what I'm so sure about. I am not conservative because I am so not into government regulating marriage or none of that. I am libertarian, but I still believe in borders and strong army, because, I mean, it's like we pay so much taxes to this build country. So we cannot like let everyone to come and whatever the one thing they want to do here. So I do believe in, I'm not like anarchist, I believe in strong defense and the borders and government to protect us from enemies. Because there are like threats that we have, like, from the countries in the Middle East, like North Korea trying to blow up America. And I think it is government's role to protect us. I am like for some limited government, but not like no government person. And some libertarians I met, they were so like there, like no borders, no military, like nothing. Is like, oh no, you're such a dreamer. Yeah.
Wow. So, what are some of your favorite books on, I don't know, anything, I guess? I know you read a lot, and I'm always looking for good book recommendations, and I'm sure my audience is too. So, you got anything for us?
Did you read the book called The Madness of Crowd?
No, I've been meaning to. Good thing you reminded me.
It's pretty good. It really made me think a lot. And I recently just read a book by Dave Rubin. It's called Don't Burn This Book.
Don't burn this
Yeah,
book.
literally Don't Burn This Book. And I recently very inspired by Candace Owens.
Mm-hmm.
The book just came out. It's called Blackout. And
Mm-hmm.
really rethinking about Democratic Party and how they were being the most racist party and now pretending they are not. And how they were creating KKK. I did not know. It's like I did not know the Democratic Party was creating apartheid and creating KKK, and now switching their position. They're like opportunists, and it's a very refreshing because herself is like African. I mean, I don't even want to say African American because she's not from Africa. She was born in America.
Yeah. That drives me crazy, by the way, when like, you know, you're watching the Olympics or something and there's a black French person and it's like, this is an African American. It's not from Africa, not from America. That does not work.
Yeah, so she herself like knows it and how they, because I live in America, I mean Chicago, I saw the first hand of the South Side, and the problem is really Democrats keep telling them they are the victims and they have no ability to rise beyond their trauma, and also, you know, they don't like government is keep babying them, so the fathers are not staying at home and they don't take the responsibility of their behavior. All these black children growing up in a family where there are no fathers. So yeah, it was so like, yeah, it was very so much facts for me to learn, and those things like new inspiration I got recently.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely check out those books, and I'm sure my audience will too. Where can people find you?
I have recently started a YouTube channel called Voice of North Korea by Yeonmi Park. Or I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, not TikTok because of obvious reasons. But yeah, other platforms they definitely find me there. Yeah.
Okay, great. And it's all under, I think, at Yeonmi Park, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. This was a really enlightening conversation. And yeah, I mean, I hope you get more books out because I think you have a lot to share with the world.
Oh, thank you, Jimmy. It was such a pleasure talking to you. And I hope to talk to you soon again.
Okay.